Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Steven Brown, and in today's video, guys, well, I don't know. What are we going to talk about in today's video? Let's take a look at Twitter.com. Normally, there's some good conversation starters on Twitter.com. Let's see what the good people of Leafs Nation have to say after the Toronto Maple Leafs have... Oh. Okay. Guys who had a bad game. Morgan Rielly didn't play too well, and that was documented on Twitter. Frederik Andersen. His performance always gets documented after a loss, no matter if it was necessarily his fault or not. Don't have an opinion as to this specific game. Mitch Marner with the turnovers, whenever he makes them, it often always leads to a goal against. It's never just something harmless. William Nylander had the puck over the glass penalty, and I don't think that he actually played that bad in this game. Aside from this, I thought that the whole team looked a little bit flat, and the Vancouver Canucks goalie, I mean, to give him credit, because you have to, played very, very well these last two games. Saying you're only as good as your last game is very, very toxic, because guys like Mitch Marner, guys like William Nylander, stepped up huge when Austin Matthews was out of the lineup against the Edmonton Oilers. Their performances were very, very appreciated. It was very, very encouraging. And Morgan Rielly, to criticize him after every single defensive miscue, first of all, that's a continuous headache just waiting to happen, because he's going to make a lot of those. You just have to accept he is what he is, and what he is a defenseman who had 18 points in his last 19 games. So you just need to relax a little bit. All of that, of course, building to this tweet. People make fun of Leaf fans because no fan base reacts so nuclear after losing a game, especially after two losses where they outchanced their opponents 34-17 and 35-27 and still sit atop their division by 7 points. But by the time I'm done uploading this video, someone will probably point out that no one's talking about the goal scoring. They're talking about the defense. And to that, I would say they just held Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid to 1 point between the two of them in 3 games. You know, Mike Babcock was a bit of a loser and a nuisance and most of all just annoying, if I'm going to be honest with you. But even he evaluated the team in 5-game stints and not after each individual game. Again, my long-winded point here is that the conversation surrounding not just the players on this team, but the team itself cannot be so hot and cold. It can't just do 180 merry-go-rounds after every individual game. Eventually, you have to take a step back and look at the team's problems and look at yourself and ask you, maybe, are you overstating things just a bit? And that's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to look at yourself and identify your own biases. I have my own biases. In the previous video, I said that if the Maple Leafs were to acquire another defenseman, that it would be Zach Bogosian coming out of the lineup. And everyone in the comment section decided that it would be Travis Dermott. Now, I like Travis Dermott. And if we had to have the conversation, who is better? Who's been better this season? Who would I rather have in the lineup? I would say Travis Dermott over a guy like Zach Bogosian. But that's only because I was saying to bring in a guy who is Zach Bogosian, but just better. David Savard was the player that I was talking about. They're both very similar type players, but David Savard is the better version of Zach Bogosian. And if you had to frame the conversation like this, because asking if one player is better than the other, they're two different players, entirely different players. If Zach Bogosian was asked to play Travis Dermott's role on the Toronto Maple Leafs, he probably couldn't do it. And if Travis Dermott was asked to play Zach Bogosian's role, he probably couldn't do his either. I didn't realize that that was something that me and you, the viewer, were so divided upon, but that's okay. Because just like the Maple Leafs, we're a team here. We're doing this together, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Alright, the Leafs just closed out a road trip that saw them play 5 games in 8 nights, 4 games in 6 nights, and 3 games in their last 4 nights. And there's a lot of guys recently that are just coming back from injuries or still dealing with injuries. I mean, Zach Hyman's a freak of nature. That guy's always just dogging it at 110%. That's a guy that a couple of years ago against the Boston Bruins, killing penalties against Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak, it did not know that one of his ACLs were torn. So Zach Hyman, I'm not going to make any excuses for him, but guys like Joe Thornton, Jake Muzzin, Austin Matthews, Frederik Andersen, all still coming back from injuries too. We don't know if they're at 100%. We don't know if other guys are banged up too. It's a long road trip. Can we cut them a little bit of slack? They got 2 days off, and they got a very, very important homestand against the Winnipeg Jets, or the Winnipeg Jets, whatever you want to call them, which is going to be very, did I already say that it's going to be very important? But as per the title of this video, what do I want to see happen for the Toronto Maple Leafs moving into this year's trade deadline? It's a tough conversation. It's a tough conversation to start because there's multiple different angles at which you can attack this from. You can say that it's not worth them spending the assets because they don't have a goalie who you can trust to guide them through the playoffs, to maybe steal you a couple of games or even steal you a series. And then there's another angle that says that the formatting this year is allowing a Canadian team to make the Final Four, to be 8 wins away from the Stanley Cup, to be 4 wins away from the finals. How do you pass up that opportunity? How do you not go for it? Then there's the angle of, okay, well, if you want to talk about adding to this team, who's it going to be? Well, I don't like that guy. I don't like that guy either. I wish we could have this guy, but the expansion draft, and I don't know how to plan for this. There's a lot of different things that we could do, but this video is not about what we could do. We already made those videos, which will be linked above the screen and at the end of this one. What do I want to happen here for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Last year's trade deadline, the Maple Leafs did absolutely nothing. Zippo, because the game before the trade deadline was the David Ayres game, and Kyle Dubas and the team felt like they didn't deserve help. They didn't deserve him to go out there and spend a first-round pick or a second-round pick or futures to make that team any better. That if that team was going to get better, it had to be with the players that they already had on the team. This year's team, they did not lose to an emergency backup 42-year-old American Hockey League Zamboni driver. They did blow a 5-1 lead to the Ottawa Senators. We have graduated past 4-1. We're not quite as far as losing to the 42-year-old Zamboni driver, but we're somewhere in the sweet spot there. The team is 18-6-2. Frederik Andersen is what he is. Morgan Rielly is what he is. This team is what it is. I don't fully trust them, but I just want them to try. And I think that you guys do too. So what does trying look like? I think that the third line of Mikheyev, Engvall, and Hyman is good. It's good to know that that does work on occasions, and if the Maple Leafs did need to mix up their lineup, or if there were injuries, they could go back to that line at a later point, but I am not comfortable having that line together for the long term. So getting a player that pushes Kerfoot back into the bottom 6 is going to be key, for me anyway. Don't worry about the salary cap right now. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Maybe I would have liked to have called up Nick Robertson and maybe saw if he could have been that player, but of course, he's day-to-day with an injury right now. Another defenseman that can play high-leverage defensive minutes and do it well. Another defenseman, because I understand the need, the want, and why people like Zach Bogosian, can bring a physical element to this lineup. And for the people in the comment section saying that, well, for a playoff run, why wouldn't you want a guy like Zach Bogosian in there who just won a Stanley Cup last year? Tampa Bay trusted him enough to play on their top pair. Yeah, he played on their top pair with Victor Hedman, the Conn Smythe MVP of the playoffs, best defenseman in the league, basically a freak on skates. And when he played with anyone not named Victor Hedman, the Tampa Bay Lightning got outscored and outchanced to absolute hell, and that is reflected in the expected goals for and the actual goals against. Because what if the Maple Leafs were able to do this when they were either tied or winning or wanted to play a little bit more of a defensive game? Instead of just having Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl, they can go to another defensive pairing in TJ Brodie and David Savard, a guy who knows a thing or two about beating the Tampa Bay Lightning, a team that a lot of people are professing that the Toronto Maple Leafs can't beat, even though they aren't playing them, maybe even this year entirely. So in regards for these two players, David Savard and the other placeholder, which could be a guy like Mikael Granlund, could be a guy like Eric Staal, could be Nick Robertson, if he comes back and shows that he can hang there, the Maple Leafs would have a little bit more money at their disposal if it was a guy like him. But all the Toronto Maple Leafs need to make room for when acquiring players is this number right here, the remaining daily cap hit. And if we're looking at Mikael Granlund, I mean, he's a guy who's a good offensive player on a team that's not really known for their offense. So putting him from the Nashville Predators to the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that is known for their offense, you're going to see a boost in his numbers. And yeah, David Savard's not very good offensively. Zach Bogosian is probably a better offensive player than him, but David Savard is a better defensive player than him, and that's why you would want him in the lineup. And the math checks out. From January 13th, the start of the season, until April 12th, the trade deadline, that is a gap of 90 days. Then from January 13th until May the 8th, that is 116 days in total. And if you divide 90 by 116, that'll give you the percentage, or at what point of the season the trade deadline falls, and it's 77.5% of the way there. So you have to prorate their cap hit at the beginning of the season by that number, and that's how much money you need to acquire that player at the trade deadline. Which means the Toronto Maple Leafs would only need $420,000 in salary cap space to acquire a player like Mikael Granlund at this year's trade deadline. Now, currently, Cap Friendly is only projecting the Maple Leafs to have $130,000 in deadline cap space, so it could be a little bit of a problem, but the Maple Leafs need to move out of LTIR. And once they do, when Wayne Simmonds comes back, they can start accumulating that money again. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, let's try to relax with this. We got 2 days off, then they play a big set against the Winnipeg Jets. It's going to be an important one. Hopefully they're well rested and they come out flying.